Welcome back to my channel, and for today I'm going to be taking a look at the Alden N5802 boot in Navy Chrome XL leather. So what was it that drew me towards this boot in the first place? Well, as I've said before many times in the past, I just tend to prefer plain toe boots. So when Black Friday came around, the Mart had their annual sale on factory seconds. And in case you didn't know this already, the Mart is the only store that can sell Alden factory seconds. So how can you tell if a pair of boots or shoes is an Alden factory second? Well, very easily. You look at the lining, and if you see this big R stamp, then you know it's a factory second. So when I looked at their options for Black Friday, I noticed that they had a pair of these N5802 boots in some kind of navy leather. Now, I called the Mart and tried to confirm what kind of leather it is. They told me it was a navy calf and not Chrome XL. Now, I did get really excited when I first heard that these were navy calf because not long ago there was a really nice version of the Alden Indie boot that was made in some kind of very limited run of navy leather. And unfortunately, this was one of those very limited runs, and as far as I know, it's not going to return again. This is one of my biggest frustrations with Alden, is the fact that they will introduce these really interesting leathers, but you never see them again. So I decided to roll the dice on them, and this is the first time I purchased a pair of factory seconds from the Mart. So when these arrived, was I disappointed in the fact that they were Navy Chrome XL? Not at all, because I was honestly looking for a navy plain toe boot in Chrome XL. This Navy Chrome XL comes from Horween in Chicago, the very famous tannery. It's one of the easiest leathers to break in, especially for a boot. It's very soft, a little bit stretchy. It's just a very easy leather on your feet. But of course, being Chrome XL, it makes it very easy to get scuffed and scratched. It's just part of the nature of having a Chrome XL boot. Now, I will say that this color of navy is very dark, and the color of Navy Chrome XL varies quite a bit. There are some that are on the darker side, such as this pair. There are other pairs that have a lot more noticeable blue. Even some have shades of green and gray or teal. So you really don't know what you're going to get if you order blindly like I did. In most types of lighting, my boots are going to appear as almost black, especially in indoor lighting, and even in direct sunlight, they're still going to appear very dark. However, where this boot really shines is in the indirect sunlight or very light sunlight. That's where you really see more of the blue show through. The boots originally came with these very dark blue laces, but I swapped them out for a pair of these beige Alden laces that Alden sent me a while back. These match the stitching on the welt very well. Which, speaking of, this boot contains a 360-degree welt, which is interesting because a lot of Alden boots have a 270-degree. This one goes all the way around, and it's a flat welt, which is also a big plus because most of the time when I get boots, they usually have a reverse welt, but this has a regular flat welt, and it has the nice beige contrast stitching, which I love. In terms of eyelets, this boot contains a total of 9 of them. There are no speed hooks, which is kind of interesting, and the piping around it is black, so you can see a little difference between the navy leather and the black piping. I also love that Alden uses this cream-colored lining on some of their boots and shoes. It just goes perfectly with the rest of the boot. It's just a nice touch. Which, speaking of the lining, I can tell these boots were made in either 2015 or 2005. That 5 means that these were made in a year that ends in a 5, so it has to be either 2015 or 2005. Probably 2015 for this pair. And then inside the boots you have a nice leather sole. It might not be full grain leather, but it is leather. And then you have the nice heel pad sock liner with a cushion underneath, and then underneath that you have the steel shank. All the usual great stuff that Alden gives you. These boots were made on the 379X last, which was something I had no experience with. So when I was gathering information about sizing for this last, I read a lot of different opinions on it. But one thing I did read is that if you have a high instep, it may be better to stick with your true to size for these boots. That's what I did, and that's in fact the only size they had available. but I'm really glad I decided to try it because they fit perfectly. I mean, these fit as well as my modified last boots in a half size smaller. The 379X, also known as the military last, has a very round toe. Now, overall, it does remind me a lot of the modified last. It just has a similar feel to it. There's a similar shape underneath the arch support. There's not a lot of extra space at the waist. It hugs your foot very nicely, just like how the modified last does. However, it does not have nearly as much instep room if you take the same size as the modified last. In my case, I already said, I went up a half size, so there's no issue with instep room. It fits beautifully. It's very comfortable. It's an easy last for my foot. But even though this has the feel of the modified last, another difference is that the sole at the waist, you can see it's not nearly as narrow as the modified last. I wouldn't say it's a long last. It's about the same size as the modified if you're comparing a half size down in the modified in terms of length. But as you can see in this last, the toe box does not taper like it does in the modified. It's just a very round sort of shape. Now, when I first saw this round toe, I thought it was a little weird looking, but after seeing the boots on my feet and just looking at the whole picture, I realized it's a very nice last. It looks good. My heel to ball also lines up perfectly where it should. The heel is nice and snug but not tight. Everything just feels great. Now, in terms of sizing advice, I would say if you're able to stay with true to size, I think it's going to depend on if you have a higher instep. If you have a lower volume foot at the instep, it's possible you might need to size down a half size. But if you're more like me and you have a higher instep, there's a good chance you could probably stay true to size with these boots. I can't give you any perfect sizing advice. It's really just one of those lasts you have to try and see if it works out for your foot. The tongue on the boots is not gusseted, just like all my other Alden boots. It just hangs freely. Alden makes a lot of boots and shoes for the Japanese markets using the 379X last. And also, trying to gather information about this boot was really difficult because there just wasn't much information online about it. The N5802 boot is one of those more obscure models that's probably only known to mostly the Japanese market. Probably most people in North America do not know about this model of boot. So when I was doing my homework on it, I eventually was able to find this website called Museum Arc, which Alden does make specifically boots and shoes for this company, including this model. On Museum Arc's website, they state that this N5802 is a black boot. So I'm not sure if they are just incorrect in their color assessment, or perhaps this is a different version of this same model. I will add that my pair does not have a Museum Arc stamp on the heel of the boots like it shows on their websites, so I really don't know who Alden was making this pair of boots for. I don't know if it was a reject that was intended for Museum Arc, or if it was just something else they had going on the side. This boot remains a mystery. Overall, I really like this color of darker navy though, because it pairs a lot easier with my clothing options. It goes really well with dark greens. It'll go well with denim and jeans. It'll go well with light blues. It goes well with so many different types of pants and slacks. Honestly, one of the problems with the brighter shades of blue is that I have a really hard time pairing them with my clothing. So I'm actually glad that these are more on the darker side because those middle shades of blue are a lot more difficult for me to wear. I used to have a pair of blue suede Higgins Mill boots, but they were right in that middle shade of blue, which was difficult to pair, so sadly I let them go. Now, I've said a lot of things that I like about this boot. What are the things that I did not like? Only a couple of things. The biggest thing by far is that this was the first time I tried the plantation sole, which is a crepe sole with a leather tip in the front. I'm just not a big fan of this sole. It's a squishy kind of sole. Now, I understand what this sole was intended for. It was very clearly intended for two things, comfort being the first, and the second, being able to handle bad weather. For both of those purposes, it's great. It's also a really good option if you're doing a lot of walking. It's very easy on the feet, and it's also lightweight. So I can see the appeal of it. I have to be honest in that I do appreciate that it's lightweight. It reminds me a lot of the Allen Edmonds Othello rubber sole that they used to offer on the Badlands and the Wilbert shoes. Anyone who's tried those shoes knows what I'm talking about. It's a little bit of a squishy sole. The downside to this sole is that it just does not offer great support. I would have preferred a leather sole, or even a day-night sole would have been better than this for me. Now, when I was considering buying these boots, I asked one of my friends about this plantation sole. In his own words, he told me this sole was better than anything Allen Edmonds offered. Just buy it. Well, I don't think I'm going to take advice from that friend again, because I have to say I disagree with his opinion on that. It's not a terrible sole, don't get me wrong, but it's just not as supportive feeling as a day-night sole or a leather sole. My Higgins Mill boots from Allen Edmonds, the original pair, those have a day-night sole with no steel shank, yet they still feel more supportive than this pair of Aldens that does have a steel shank. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how different this sole is versus day-night or leather. It's not the softest rubber sole I've ever had. I've had worse, but again, it's on about that same level of the Othello rubber sole that Allen Edmonds used to offer. And another thing about this sole is that it just looks kind of ugly. It looks like they took a bunch of recycled tires and then mashed them all together and then put a little leather tip on the front for reinforcement. I just don't really like the look of it that much, and I would prefer something more supportive. So the lesson for me here was I'm not going to buy another pair of boots or shoes that has this type of sole on it. Now, do I regret buying them? No, because they still are very wearable, and the price was slightly less than paying half of a full price boot. So I don't have any regrets, and I really like the way the uppers look. Now, one other minor thing is that it does have 9 eyelets on it. I wish it had speed hooks at the top. This is not a problem really for me. It's just that I prefer speed hooks because it's a lot easier to take off the boots faster if you have them, especially if you have to take off your boots sometimes throughout the day. It's just a lot more convenient to have speed hooks on there. In regards to them being factory seconds, there were several flaws on these boots. There is this obvious line dent that goes across one of the toe boxes that you can see here. You can also see that the welt stitching is not as clean and perfect as it usually is with first quality. And you can see that there's this discoloration on the upper here, which I'm not sure what happened there with the leather. And then there was this little gouge or cut right here on the leather. So this will give you an idea of what to expect with factory seconds, but none of these things bother me because these are all things that probably would happen with time anyway. And knowing what I paid for these, I certainly don't mind having these flaws on the boots because they still look good from a distance. Now, if you buy a pair of factory seconds from the Shoe Mart, they don't send you boot bags, but they do send you this nice shoehorn and a thank you card. And they also will let you return them if you don't like them. So I have to add that my experiences with the Shoe Mart have been excellent. Their customer service has always been very good. I encourage everyone who's interested in Alden boots to check out their inventory during Black Friday. They do not have sales very often on factory seconds, but they usually do at least once a year during Black Friday. And the fact that I did not have to pay sales tax on these was another added bonus. I understand that there's a lot of criticism against Alden these days about how they're using leatherboard in many parts of their boot. I get all that, and it's legitimate criticism. However, it's also legitimate though that there are other reasons why somebody might still want to wear Alden despite these flaws. One reason might be the lasts. The lasts tend to work out really well for me, and truthfully, I just don't find a lot of boot lasts that tend to work really well for me. These lasts, like the 379X, the modified last, the Berry last, all of them tend to work really well for me in boots. And unfortunately, I can't say that about every brand that I've tried in the past. But another thing is that they tend to design their boots very tastefully. Eyelets tend not to be too big or too small. Everything is just done with really good taste. So you're getting something that looks great. Everything looks proportional. Nothing looks too big or too small. And of course, you're getting good support with the steel shank and excellent comfort out of the box and style. So So what I'm getting at is that, yes, there are some concerns with Alden, and maybe they are overpriced, but there's also very legitimate reasons why somebody might choose them, because there are certain benefits to wearing Alden that some of us just do not get with every other brand out there. So I hope you got something useful out of this video. Thank you for watching, and I will see you on the next video.